Move to our next keynote profile, I'm pleased to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Ayoub Regragui from Morocco. He is an applied linguistic researcher with expertise in language education, curriculum design, social linguistics, and academic research. He will be presenting on the topic AI language and identity towards inclusive educational practices. So let us warmly welcome Dr. Ayoub.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. Let me just share this audio over here. Just trying to share this.
Yes, sir, we can see it now.
You can see it, right?
Yeah.
All right, good. Um, all right. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to sincerely thank the organizers for this kind invitation. It's truly a pleasure and an honor to be here today. My name is Ayoub Regragui, and today I will be talking about the relationship between artificial intelligence and language and identity. More specifically, I would like to explore how we can move towards more inclusive educational practices in this, as we all know, rapidly evolving digital context. This topic is particularly why this topic is particularly important, uh, because AI is not only transforming how we teach, but also what knowledge is being transmitted and whose voices are being, for example, represented. Um, um, so throughout this talk, I will try to reflect on both the opportunities and the challenges that this transformation brings. So at the first part of this presentation, to begin with, I would like to highlight three key elements um, that frame this discussion. First, we are witnessing today a very rapid integration, as I said earlier, of artificial intelligence in education. AI tools are already present in classrooms, in assessment, and even in how our students, for example, search for their for and produce knowledge. At the same time, we need to remember that language is not neutral. It is closely linked to identity, the one that shapes how, for example, learners see themselves and so on and so forth. Um, so um, um, at the same time, we need to remember that language is not, as I said earlier, neutral. So it is something that linked to the language construction and identity construction. And this brings us to the third point, which is as it's featured on the board. As these technologies evolve, there is an increasing kind of need to ensure that our education and practices remain inclusive. And I underline this term, inclusive and inclusivity, because it's very much important. Because if we are not careful, these systems can intentionally reproduce inequalities or marginalize certain cultural perspectives. And this is for me very much critical. So the challenge is not simply to see AI, but to see it in a way that supports diversity, representation, and inclusion. Some key question, the research focus here, the research focus. Um, uh, Sorry. Now, to be more precise, this talk focuses on the intersection between three key dimensions: artificial intelligence, language, and identity. So these three elements are increasingly interconnected, especially in educational contexts, where, for example, technology is becoming a central component, a central cornerstone, an important factor of transmitting knowledge and cultural presence. So these three elements are, as I said, interconnected. And what interests me here is not only how AI supports language learning, but also how it influences the way identities are constructed and represented. Um, this naturally leads to important implications for education equity. In other words, so we need to ask whether these technologies are helping to reduce inequalities, which is very much important, or on the contrary, if we see it otherwise, so how it could be reinforming existing ones. So, and this is exactly where applied linguistics, I should believe, plays a key role, because it allows us to critically examine language practices, cultural representation, and meaning making processes within this new digital environment. Some key questions: how does AI reshape linguistic and cultural identities? And what are the risks and opportunities for inclusion and happen? This is one of the questions that I'm trying to answer through the course of this research. Some theoretical framework. To better understand this issue, I rely on three main theoretical perspectives. The first one is intercultural communicative competence, as developed by Byron. The idea here is that learning a language is not only about grammar or vocabulary or language focused practices, but also about understanding how, for example, cultures interacting with difference and developing openness. The second is the second perspective that is brought into the service in this regard comes also from Bourdieu's concept of cultural capital, a very known concept in this regard, which helps us understand that not all cultures are represented equally in education. Some forms of knowledge we are valued more than others, and this creates imbalances in what students learn and how they position themselves. And finally, I draw on the idea of identity construction in education, because schools and learning environments play a very important key role in the shaping or the making up of how learners see themselves. And this is for me is very much important as well. Another point here, and at this very, very, very context, I would like also to focus more directly on the relationship between language and identity. First, language plays a central role in shaping identity. It is through the language that individuals, students in more particular, express how are or how they are, where they come from, and how they relate to others. Second, education is one of the main spaces where cultural norms are transmitted. What students, for example, read, hear, and learn in school contributes to an extent to the building of their understanding of society and culture. So now we look more concretely at how AI is used in language education today. We can identify several developments. First, we have what we call adaptive platforms. So these systems adjust the content based on the learner's levels, pace, and performance. So, for example, for each student can follow a more individualized learning path and learning opportunity. So, a special learning opportunity is given to a special student based on his or her need. Second, we are seeing more and more automated content generation. So AI can now produce text, exercises, translations, and even feedback almost on an instant manner, which is very much to be noted and stressed over here. So this is something that was not possible before at this scale. And finally, all of this contributes to the creation of personalized sort of learning environments. So, in this theory, this is very positive because it allows learners to engage with content that is adapted to their specific needs. And I underline the term specific needs, which is very much important as well. But at the same time, and within this line of thought, we also need to ask questions that raise what kind of content is being generated, and whose cultural perspective is being embedded in this system. Um, Before discussing these challenges, it is important to recognize that AI also brings into the surface or offers significant opportunities for language education. First, AI provides access to a wide range of resources. Learners now are no longer now limited to a single textbook, for example. They can explore multiple resources, perspectives, and types of content. So this variety and multiplicity of resources that are already given to the student, enriches its teacher learning processes. And second, as we mentioned earlier, AI supports personalized learning paths. So students can progress at their own pace, receive immediate feedback, and focus on their specific needs, as I said earlier. And finally, it can play an important role in supporting multilingualism, which is the cornerstone of this research. And tools in this regard, such as translation systems or language assistants, make it easier for learners to engage with different languages and culture. So, generally speaking, and overall, these developments have the potential to make education more flexible, more accessible, and more importantly, more inclusive. So, however, and this is where I would like to probably move next. These opportunities um, also come with important challenges that we need to address critically. So now, if we look more critically at AI systems, one of the first major challenges we encounter as bias, for example, all systems are trained on large data sets, and these data sets often reflect dominant cultures, dominant languages, and dominant perspectives. This is something very much critical to think about as well. Um, so, in reality, AI is not neutral. It reproduces the patterns and imbalances that already exist in society. So, as a result, minority voices, for example, those damped down voices, those voiceless voices, for example, can become less visible. So this issue of cultural visibility is also being brought into the surface, which is something very much critical to mention as well. Or even completely absent from the content generated by these systems. And this has direct implications for education, because if learners are mostly exposed, for example, to dominant cultural narratives, this can limit their understanding of diversity and reduce the visibility of other identities. So, in this sense, AI does not just reflect inequality, it can also actually reinforce it. So, and sometimes amplify this process at even a larger scale, okay? Because it's technically and practically possible to do so. Because of this, of course, generating system capabilities that AI is characterized with and by. So the challenge here is clear. How can we design or use AI systems that are more balanced, more inclusive, and more representative? Um, another challenge here, which is an important challenge, is what we can all call as standardization. So, because AI systems tend to simplify information in order to make it more accessible and efficient. But when it comes to language and culture, this simplification can be problematic. And cultural realities are more are complex are complex, as we all know, and diverse and context dependent. Um, um, so as a result, we may observe a loss of diversity in the content that learners are exposed to. Instead, for example, of encountering a variety of perspectives, students may receive more uniform and standardized representations of language and cultures. And over time, this can lead to more uniform learning experiences where differences are minimized and rather than just explored in such a way. So again, this question is not only about efficiency, but about processing richness, processing this nuance and diversity in educational content. The third challenge, and perhaps one of the most critical ones related to the notion of identity in this regard, when for example AI systems become central in language education, but also start influencing how identities are shaped and represented. One of the risks is the global erosion of local identities, as we see in this world. Because if learners are constantly exposed to globalized content, certain local or national cultural elements may become less visible. In the case of Morocco, to make this discussion maybe more concrete, I would like to briefly refer to the Moroccan context. Morocco is often described as a country with a plural identity shaped by Arab, Amazigh, African, and also Jewish cultural influences. This plural dimension is officially recognized and it is increasingly emphasized in educational reforms. However, when we look, for example, at educational materials and more closely, we still observe a kind of relatively limited representation of this diversity. Some central components, especially minority or less visible ones, remain underrepresented or only partially integrated. So this is just to refer to the Moroccan Moroccan context. And so after identifying these challenges, the question becomes, how can we move forward in a more kind of inclusive way? I would like to suggest three main directions in this regard. First, we need a more critical use of AI in education. So this means that not simply adopting these tools, but also questioning how they work and what data they rely on, and what kind of content they produce. Because this is really very 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 much important. The second, and there is a strong need for more inclusive data design. So, which means that AI systems are trained on more diverse and representative data sets. They are more likely to reflect a wider range of cultures and perspectives. And finally, we need to reinforce what we can call culturally responsive pedagogy. In other words, so teachers should remain central in the process, guiding, contextualizing, and sometimes correcting the content generating AI, because this is not something that we should take for granted. We need to be very careful about the way we perceive these generative system capabilities that can render and reduce cultural norms into unities and homogeneities and yeah, with no relevance to their heterogeneities. When we talk about cultural norms. So role of educators, for example. So even with the increasing presence of AI, teachers remain central, as I said earlier, in the learning process. And first, educators can play a role in mediating AI-generated content, which means that they can help students interpret, question, contextualize what they're learning. Second, teachers are essentials also in promoting critical thinking. So students should not simply accept AI generated information. They should learn to analyze it, to challenge it, and even to reflect on it, which is important. And finally, educators are responsible for ensuring cultural balance. So they can bring back, for example, perspectives that may be missing, highlight diversity, create, for example, space for multiple voices, and so on and so forth. So just some implications, research implications. So based on all these elements that we've been talking about, we can identify several key elements for educators. For example, there is a need to rethink curriculum design. Curricula should not only integrate digital tools but also reflect cultural diversity. Second, also it is important to integrate diversity directly uh, into AI systems, and this means, for example, working on the data, the models, the design process, etc. And finally, we need to strengthen digital literacy. So, which means that both teachers and students should develop the ability to understand how AI works. And just to conclude, I would like to briefly come back to the main idea of this talk. Today, artificial intelligence is not clearly reshaping the way language is thought, learned, and experienced. And as we have seen, it has also a direct impact on identity. So this transformation offers important opportunities, but it also raises significant challenges. So, and this is why inclusion must remain at the center of our reflection. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you very much.
Dr. Regragui, for your insightful
Thank
and
you very much.
thought-provoking session. Your
Thank you very
perspective
much.
on AI and education were truly valuable. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. And if you have, of course, any questions or things that you want me to probably reflect on, I'll wholeheartedly go for that. I'm not really just trying to. All right. So I'm all ears if you have any questions or probably things that you want to elaborate on. I'll be happy to answer that. If not, I wish I would like to express my thanks to the organizers for this very important opportunity given to us as researchers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.